let's start with the news about what's happening around the world. Well, first of all, let me tell you that there has been a change. This is in the politics of Turkey, where these systems, we're seeing these attack and defense systems. The Russian S-400 defense systems are going to be returned by Turkey. This is with the idea of rejoining the United States F-35 fighter jet program. In other words, for the United States to sell them the F-35, they have to get rid of the S-400s. And so, well, Turkey is gradually breaking away from its relationship with Russia and, well, moving more toward the West. At least that's the direction they're taking right now. Another image that, well, has surprised people today is what we're seeing in Brussels. We'll see what it's about in just a few moments. But obviously, these are significant protests in that region of Europe, right? And well, as they say, it's also the capital of Europe. Check it out. This image that has surprised everyone, an image captured by David Erickson. This happens in Montana, in the United States, where a bunch of trees start to fall. According to reports, hurricane-force winds knocked down dozens of trees this morning between Hamilton and Missoula. Well, that's how it is. A bunch of trees just fell down, according to reports. The firefighters are there, and well, they were notified about everything that was happening. A lot of trees fell in this place. How have you been? Thank you very much for joining us. Good morning, it's 11:32, Antemeridium here in northeastern Mexico. Let's discuss global news. What's going on worldwide? What are the most interesting points that catch our attention today? This image is shown. This is over in Australia on the fence at Bondi Beach. Do you remember this beach where the terrorist attack happened, mainly against the Jewish community? And well, a car was found with 5 people who were supposedly suspected of being Islamists, of trying to, well, carry out some kind of suspicious activity. At least they've been detained. 5 men were apparently in there. Well, they were people who were being sought. Well, that's it. In Australia, there's also a bit of paranoia, obviously, with everything that happened recently. Also, another situation that draws attention is, well, this reaction that NATO itself has had. NATO itself regarding what's coming for Russia, for Ukraine. And there's also a very interesting point that today, well, comes up. The head of NATO himself. Let's listen to what the Secretary General of NATO himself says. Let's listen. Let's see the reaction to what's happening in Europe between NATO, Russia, and Ukraine. Let's listen to this. Let's hear what's next.
Putin needs to know that if, after a peace agreement, he tries to attack Ukraine again, the reaction will be devastating. And that's exactly how we're designing these security guarantees.
Well, we'll comment on what he said in a moment, but in the meantime, let's also listen to President Lukashenko. As he calls himself the last dictator of Europe, he says the following. He says,
"The front positions are equipped with the Arachnik missile system. We have had it since yesterday and it is entering combat service."
well, they already have the Arachnik. The Arachnik is already active, supposedly in Belarus. This is warned by Lukashenko himself. Meanwhile, a comment from Zelensky on the topic of NATO.
Since my first conversation with the former president of the United States, Biden, I have been raising that topic about NATO. Why? Because we have it written in our constitution and in our European path. And I asked him, honestly, can Ukraine join NATO? Because we want that and we understand that those are real security guarantees. This is what we had pre-war. President Biden told me, no, they will not be in NATO.
Well, that's it.
I've addressed this issue time and again, and certain people in the White House smiled at me and had other reactions because of it. And they always said I was tough. I don't know why.
I don't know. Well, there it is. That's the message I delivered over there in Brussels. The same one this very December over there. In these meetings, this summit that's taking place between Ukraine and the European leaders. And well, it's clear that now they're trying to somehow make a kind of Article 5 specifically for Ukraine. The problem is when it's just a rule that can easily be broken, like other agreements have already been broken, obviously. So Ukraine doesn't want to give up everything it's asking for. Russia is practically targeting all the territory. Soon, we'll discuss Russia's possible plans, according to the Institute for the Study of War. What is this analysis of the war really based on the facts and available signs? What's happening? First of all, let me tell you that there's a warning. On one hand, NATO, which says, as we saw in this comment, pretty quickly but very directly, right?
Putin needs to know that after a peace agreement, if he tries to attack Ukraine again, the reaction will be devastating. And that's exactly how we're designing these security guarantees.
These guarantees that they're designing are exactly the ones we were talking about. I mean, they're designing guarantees for a forceful, devastating counterattack according to NATO, so that Ukrainian territory is respected, so that there's no temptation for another invasion. There are several responses, including Lukashenko announcing that Loresnik is already ready. There are several interesting details in this situation. Lukashenko stated that Loresnik arrived in Belarusian territory the previous day and that he is already operational for combat, according to him. And the state media have also reported it, he says. This medium-range missile can carry nuclear warheads and strike with an accuracy of just a few dozen meters, even at thousands of kilometers away. Its presence in Belarus reduces the response time for alliance countries, raising the level of tension in Europe. The possibility that the attack could be so immediate, so close to NATO, makes that organization nervous. During the Zapad 2025 maneuvers, Belarus had already practiced the deployment and simulated launch of Loresnik, which anticipated this move. Thank you for watching. Russia used this missile in late 2024 to attack a Ukrainian military factory in Dnipropetrovsk. Do you remember that striking image where these missiles appeared among the clouds? The factory was first reported as completely destroyed, but was later found to be only partially destroyed. So yes, the missile is powerful, but not extremely so. Despite this show of force, Lukashenko publicly asked Donald Trump not to give up on his attempts at peace. The Belarusian leader urged European countries to stay silent and not interfere with United States-led negotiations, as Lukashenko requests, clearly following the Russian narrative. Meanwhile, it is warned that since 2022, after the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has launched a systematic campaign of sabotage against Europe. The goal is to fracture European support here, create internal chaos, and overload the security systems of key countries on the continent, he says. In the past year, the Associated Press recorded 145 suspicious incidents, including explosions, fires, train attacks, cyber attacks, and vandalism. Poland and Estonia are the most affected NATO countries by this cyber attack campaign. It's hybrid warfare, with reports also in Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Latvia, and other countries. In November, a train in Poland was bombed. There were no victims, but obviously this made Poland mobilize. They deployed 10,000 soldiers to the border. And that's how it is, right? You can go back from 2025 to 2022, and you can see these movements, how they've been escalating. And he said, well, this delivery is now confirmed. I'm talking about Lukashenko while he's out giving interviews and making comments. Listen to this part where he refers, for example, to Xi Jinping. Let's hear what he's like, what President Xi is like, what kind of person he is. He's Chinese? What does that mean? What is he trying to say?
Does that mean he's intelligent, organized, incredibly calm like all Chinese people?
That's his comment about Xi Jinping. What is Xi Jinping like? Well, he's Chinese, isn't he? And then he gives the explanation, but well, then let's just say it was strange. It was strange. Didn't the comment he made about Xi Jinping bring a smile to the interviewer? I don't really know who this lady is, but anyway, well, the point is that this comment obviously draws attention, right? Meanwhile, let me also tell you what's happening with other topics. There are already, several reactions to what happened over there in a little restaurant. This happened in Washington, in a wine bar. The Secretary of Security was there, the Secretary of the Treasury, this Scott Bessay, and he was approached by a person who was there. Let's see how that situation went. Look, he was at the restaurant. This is the restaurant. He wasn't having dinner. The Treasury.
There it is.
The bottom is there.
COTTBESSET. Oh, yeah. So let's give it up for the man who is eating a peace as people starve across the world based on his sanctions, which are economic warfare.
Scott Bassett himself he himself starts booing the girl. He gets angry because the people at the restaurant don't kick her out. They don't do anything. I mean, she's not talking, she's just there. And well, he gets mad at the staff because they don't force her out. And he gets up, spits out the food, and leaves super angry. In fact, I mean, there's a moment that gets recorded where he gets up. There it is. He gets up and goes. He asks the staff. He starts talking there with the people from the restaurant, basically asking them to kick her out. What this person was saying is that, well, they've been cutting these aids that the United States used to give to different parts of the world. And they're doing it in such a blunt way without looking for a balance for someone else. All of that is causing around 600,000 people to lose their lives. These are the kinds of things the United States used to do and now does under the Trump administration. They refuse to do them, though 600,000 people rely on those, because they're mainly cures for certain diseases that are mostly found in Africa, right? And getting rid of it completely does create a gap that's not so easy to fill. There are other countries and organizations that have also started to contribute, but they still haven't managed to balance out this whole effect. That's essentially the criticism of the Secretary of the Treasury. And well, he ended up leaving the place. No, he didn't end up leaving the place. Obviously, no, he didn't like it. He didn't feel very comfortable. Also, the one who didn't feel comfortable was the president of Thailand. Look, what I meant was Indonesia. Sorry, not from Indonesia. I mean, the president of Indonesia. He tried to mingle with the people, but only halfway, like mingle with the people. But from the truck, the president was heavily guarded, just waving to people from a distance, right? And well, look at what happened.
Well, what happened?
And well, what happened? The older man approached, expecting a simple greeting, but when he greeted him, he said, well, everything, right? Basically, there's frustration, there's anger, there are delays, and all the aid has been insufficient. This especially in the north of Sumatra. We must remember they face many problems, including floods, heavy rains, and other natural disasters. They say the response has been slow. So the man was basically yelling at him, telling him, hey, hurry up. Basically, know that this situation isn't being addressed, that the support, the aid isn't arriving. And well, he just kept greeting people and enjoying mingling with the crowd, right? Well, that's part of what's happening. Let's move on to other matters. Let's go to other topics. We'll come back to geopolitics in a moment. But there's a project, a very interesting research by some scientists from India that I'd like to tell you about. Let's get to that. Notice that there's a research done by scientists from Ashoka University in India. This study aimed to simulate what the most realistic scenario of an H5N1 pandemic, which is avian flu, would look like. They didn't say, let's see what happens if avian flu gets out of control. That's not where they started. To this, to advance in humans, right? I mean, what would happen if it not only became infectious in humans, but could also be transmitted, right? The model was developed using a tool called Varatsim, which was previously used for COVID, so that tool has already been tested. So they said, well, let's try the tool. What would happen in that scenario? And they showed that a single case on a farm could trigger a devastating chain of infections if it's not contained in the first few hours. I mean, the trick here is according to their results, and we'll get to the details in a moment. The thing is, farms and health departments around the world need to be very aware that when there's a human case, it has to be addressed very quickly. It needs to be checked so that the spread doesn't start, so to speak. Yes, something needs to be done, let's say, to isolate the situation and find out who the person had contact with. So he says, the H5N1 virus is already widely present in birds and has a fatality rate close to 48%. It's extremely high in birds, he says. In this simulation, he says, if this happened in people, it could reach 10 people immediately and the scale would get out of control. From there, the study shows that the critical window is the first 2 infections. Imagine how complicated it is, how difficult it is to be able to limit this. Hopefully we don't reach the point where this actually crosses the threshold to humans, right? But well, let's hope so. It's better to be ready, prepared, and informed, especially the scientists, doctors, and health departments in each place, he says. Additionally, transmission between primary, secondary, and tertiary contacts requires even more drastic measures. The longer you take to react, the stronger the response will have to be, meaning the reaction will be more drastic. In order to contain, it says the following, right? And here, well, we're talking about a topic that hopefully we won't have to reach, right? But here's the thing, he says. The strategies analyzed are the culling of birds, which is already being done. I think almost everywhere in the world, farms and birds are culled wherever there is an issue of that kind. No, in fact, it doesn't even have to involve human infection. Just the presence of avian flu is enough for the birds to be culled. Early isolation is also being discussed. If people have this problem, it's not serious and they're calm, it's fine for them to stay home, but they shouldn't go out. I mean, that quarantine, that isolation for the person who has it really needs to be followed so it doesn't cause a bigger problem. They also say that at some point, vaccination against that avian flu will have to be considered. It's a topic that, although it doesn't significantly stop domestic transmission, does reduce the severity according to their research. But this is good. And virologist Sena Ladwana from Emory University in the United States adds to this. She reminds us that the model is based on a very efficient transmission, which is not always going to be the case. In other words, she says transmissions are not always, when it passes to humans, many times the transmissions are very, very inefficient. So she says that works in our favor. So, if it does get to humans, maybe the transmission won't be as efficient as the model used by the people from India. And that also helps balance this simulation to say, well, it's a possibility, but it won't necessarily be like that. And that's also interesting and important to understand. Finally, the authors highlight that this simulation can be updated in real time with new data. For example, if this transmission is much lower than what the simulator does, even if it's perfect, the transmission is much lower. Well, all of this is going to help so that people know how risky this type of tool is. XO, and in this case, well, avian flu in humans, right? Obviously, it's an interesting topic for analysis, for statistics, and above all, to prevent a situation like this from spreading. I think the ideal thing is for the same models to be updated all over the world. I want this information and these tools to be available everywhere. Why? And where are the experts? Where are the centers for disease control and prevention? Where are those kinds of things, right? And what if the risk is real? But time is still on our side. If detection and rapid response systems are strengthened, then it's, let's say, relatively simple, so to speak, to avoid the situation. But detection systems and rapid response systems have to be strengthened. That would be, the job of each country, the job of each health institution, right? That's where the problem sometimes lies. But anyway, it's really interesting, honestly, what these scientists have come up with. And well, let's move on to other important matters. Note that this is about changing the subject, not moving to other topics. 56% of Cuban territory, they report, will experience power cuts today. The combination of breakdowns and lack of fuel is leading to another critical day for the island's population. Union Electrica, Union Electrica, the state-owned company, announced that widespread blackouts are expected in Cuba this Thursday, an impact that could reach 56% of the national territory during peak demand hours. That's according to their own reports. Now, the predictions are very serious because it's more than half of the country without power. Once, again and again, and that's a constant issue. And a deterioration of the very limited infrastructure, by the way, a very limited economy and inflation that has skyrocketed. So a series of increasingly serious problems are piling up. It's an issue that we hope can be resolved soon, but honestly, there aren't any significant signs of that, right? I mean, that also draws attention and, well, among other things, among other matters, a pretty shocking comment stands out because there's a message from Donald Trump that's starting to worry people more and more, in which he makes a joke, again, about a third term. There's laughter and whatever you want. But during a Hanukkah reception at the White House, President Donald Trump was involved in a moment that quickly became a national controversy while speaking to donors and community leaders. This president of the United States said that he could go for a third term and that it would require $250 million. He says, think about it, I'll give you another $250 million and you could go for a second term. According to what Adelson says, he says, I'll give them to you. Although everything seemed to be said in a joking manner, the episode revived a, let's say, debate, well, in which Trump could try to stay in power beyond the constitutional limit of 2 terms. You know this? Well, okay. The 22nd Amendment clearly says no one can be elected president more than twice. The 12th Amendment prevents someone who is constitutionally ineligible for the presidency from holding the office, thus closing off alternative routes. Trump knew the political risk. Back in October, he stated the Constitution clearly prohibits running again. But the joke continues, doesn't it? Just like the temptation to stay in power. It's there, it continues, and it's still there. Notice that in other data, in other important situations as well, there's progress, a report, more information is being provided before tomorrow comes. The closest point of Atlas 13 to Earth, as I mentioned to you, the closest point doesn't mean it's going to be right next to Earth. Not at all, right? What is interesting is that, well, it's going to be the moment when it's at its closest point. But is 699 times the distance to the moon enough? Even so, the tools will allow us to observe and understand this interstellar object better, which, they say, seems to be behaving more intelligently each time. They say 13 Atlas has surprised with jets aimed at the sun, precise paths, and chemical anomalies possibly hinting at an artificial origin, per astrophysicist Avilo. He acknowledges that he has published a series of reflections in which he reaffirms his position. It cannot be confirmed at this time that it is artificial, but there are indications that this could be artificial. What he does say is that there are things that haven't happened that should have happened. For example, let's say, well, the image that has been seen, at least up until yesterday, is that the object keeps shining, even more than at other points. He says they were before perihelion, not yet close to the sun. Yet what's remarkable about the brightness in the jet is that they've lasted after passing the sun and don't appear to be fading. In fact, there's also talk about the gravitational deflection of 16.4 degrees when passing near the sun, which implies an active or controlled alignment, since it did the opposite of what it was supposed to do, a natural object. When you say only something intelligent could have done that, it would be too much of a coincidence for the object to do something very similar to what a spacecraft would do. The trajectory of 13 Atlas is also aligned with the orbital plane of the planets, within less than 5 degrees with only a 2% probability. Another thing that draws attention is that 13 Atlas is going to pass 53 million kilometers from Jupiter. This is exactly at the point of entering the Hill radius, that is, Jupiter's gravitational point. The object could be planning to release something as it approaches Jupiter. In other words, the theory is the same. It goes straight through, but releases something as it gets closer, assuming it was something artificial. Up to this point, the comet should already be broken up, or at least split into parts, something that could be confirmed tomorrow. And this would prove that it's natural. But the fact that it remains solid, that it still has significant mass and continues to shine like this, well, it suggests that there's something strange going on there. The image, or the images that have been artificially degraded, as it has been shown that the public image from China is degraded 3,600 times. One image that could have been of much higher quality was artificially degraded so that the image wouldn't look good. These kinds of details show that there is something coordinated and very curious, very strange. The axis of rotation of the three Sciatras has been aligned with the direction of the sun. And that also draws attention. I mean, the axis of rotation aligned first toward the sun, right? And not only that, but a jet is activated from both poles. When it's pointing toward the sun, it switches poles. Then another jet is activated, it switches poles again, and another jet is activated. It's a topic that has also drawn attention. Does it say this? On this point, it says the state is aligned with the solar direction, both before and after perihelion, within a margin of error of about 8 degrees. The probability of this happening by chance twice, it says, is 0.00025% the points since they occur. These jet margins are on one side of the object before perihelion and on another side after, as it rotates. This implies an ability to keep those areas thermally isolated for months, something physically unlikely for a natural comet. The object comes from a direction that matches the famous Vows signal, as we've mentioned here, detected in 1977 with a difference of a few degrees. It's also at least curious if a chemical composition that, according to Valverde and other astrophysicists, is of industrial level, due to the proportions of nickel cyanide, little iron, and so on. Not all of that we've mentioned, the lack of water. It only has 4% water in a gas plume, he says. Well, this is something extraordinarily rare. Now it's bigger, more massive, and faster than the previous two interstellar objects. Do you consider it unlikely, at least, that such a massive object would naturally appear in the solar system every decade? But, well, this simply draws attention, isn't it? An extreme polarization, an unprecedented negative polarization, which is also a topic that has been discussed. It became a bit brighter after passing the sun. In fact, instead of dimming after perihelion, it has continued to shine more and more. 8 times more than it should because of its condition. What kind of elements does it have according to the light spectrum? So, well, you can spend some time looking at all the anomalies. There are already 15 today. He mentions that before there were 15 without a solution. Some have been solved, but these still have no solution, at least for now. It's not 15. 15 different points, right? What's this about? Well, now we're getting into speculation totally, right? I mean, when they analyze, well, assuming this is something not natural and that it's artificial, well, what's it about? An ancient probe? Is that what it's really about? What kind of thing is this, right? There's a challenge that several scientists have been setting for each other lately, this one with other scientists. And so far they haven't been solved. I mean, they've been proposed to them. It's not an alternative explanation, let's say, to what is seen, at least not. And so far, well, they say it can't be physically or chemically proven how a condition like that could happen. But it's also true that there's still a lot left to study. The information that Zona Marciana has for now hasn't been sent and apparently won't be sent until February of next year. Well, that's if they even send it, because there's a problem there where they think this probe might be malfunctioning. Can you see me? Along with the information expected between February and March from the Luis area, it turns out that all the areas are either malfunctioning or can't send the information. That also draws attention. And well, he quotes this phrase that stands out and says it. He says it. He says lacking intellectual humility is a moral and methodological problem. He says it's just about waiting for the data. The exciting thing about science is exploring the unknown and its data. We can't expect our imagination to be enough to foresee what's new. We don't know what this is about. And hopefully soon there will be more data explaining how such a strange object like this can exist. That's basically what is warned in today's article, which is, well, the previous one, not the previous one, that tomorrow this closeness will happen, which I insist doesn't mean that tomorrow we'll already have all the information, but at least it's possible that some images will start to appear in the next few hours. Because, well, in the next few hours, it's already the 19th in other parts of the world where there are observatories and where they'll be able to see the phenomenon in a different way, right? That will be interesting. Let's discuss other topics. Well, so these things happen. Let's listen a little. How do those protests happen over there in Brussels? Well, so what's happening in Brussels? It's gotten complicated. These protests have become intense. Look, people are there laughing. No. I mean, they're there. They're just having a bit of fun with it. They're making a mess. They're really, really angry. With the Mercosur issue, farmers block Brussels and throw potatoes at the police. In this protest, which is intense, they say they're against the European Union's agreement with Mercosur. Meanwhile, France and Italy are holding back the signing. By the way, thousands of farmers are leading a massive protest this Wednesday in Brussels against the free trade agreement between the European Union and the South American bloc. Mercosur, right while the leaders of the bloc were meeting at a key summit. For example, over 7,000 farmers and 1,000 tractors have caused these protests to collapse. Alright, according to reports, the protesters have also set fire to tires and they've also set fire to hay. They threw potatoes at the riot police, who responded with tear gas and water cannons. The farmers also accused the Mercosur agreement of allowing a flood of cheaper agricultural products from Brazil and other South American countries. And with looser regulations, it's much easier to produce more cheaply in Brazil, and all the cheaper products end up coming to Europe. And the farmers say, well, we're going to be left out because no one will want our products since they're more expensive. So is that really the situation? There must be a way to find balance in this, but it's complicated now. Roma has also opposed the current text. It aligns with Paris, Poland, and Hungary, which are 4 countries that are against this agreement with Mercosur. Despite tensions, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen defended the pact's importance. She stated that she is still seeking to sign it, even with a trip that is being made to Brazil this weekend. The president, by the way, Luis Inácio Eduardo da Silva, warned that it's now or never to close the deal after more than 20 years of negotiations. Until now, it wasn't possible. Well, Lula says it's now or never, right? Germany, Spain, and other countries, for example the Nordic countries, are supporting the agreement. So not everyone is against it. Some countries are in favor of the agreement. Increase exports of vehicles, machinery, wine, and more, he says, right in the middle of a global trade war. So, okay, if you affect certain sectors, in this case, well, certain agricultural sectors, but you're also helping many other industries that will be able to sell more easily in South America. Products, hay, cars, hay, technology, whatever it is, well, it's going to be possible. So, well, it's a trade-off. So there's a huge issue there where not everyone agrees and not everyone will ever agree. That's the thing, right? Some infiltrators, they say, have been vandalizing windows of the European Parliament, but the farmers insist that they're not the ones doing the vandalizing, that they've only set these tires on fire, which look very dramatic, but they're not vandalizing the building. At least that's what they say, but they claim there are groups that infiltrate and have been carrying out these kinds of actions. No, at least that's what's being reported, and well, that's also an important part of the issue, right? Another important matter. What's been happening in the world is this curious image. Isn't that what you're seeing there? It's the, what's it called? Like the title there is in China, the title is pretty tough, and someone realized it's so tough that you can literally cut a pineapple with it, right? Supposedly there isn't. The guy comes out. Well, this thing has gone viral that the title is so... There are two people with the title cutting watermelons and apples, and I don't know what else. Many things surely until the title is ruined. Well, but there's the curious image of the day. By the way, another curious image is these little dogs in a shelter. They brought them a bunch of toys and let each little dog choose one. They let them pick out a toy. Really strange? Because look, I was there watching the whole video and you can see how, I mean, some of them grab one right away, but most of them spend time there searching. And it's like they get excited about one, grab it, and then do their thing. I think it's the connection with the little toy, but it's really curious, really interesting the way, well, check it out. Their tail, they're super excited. The dog is there with its toy, just happy. I mean, it's really, really cool. What's it called? Well, the dynamic doesn't stop for these dogs, you know? They've been rescued too. Well, another thing that stands out is this man we're seeing here. The Prime Minister of Poland says that this is happening. A turning point, he says, and a turning point means that everyone agrees it's worth trying. And it would be fair and beneficial for Europe, ensuring that guarantees must be given to Europe. And what if these statements were given to the media over there in Europe, in Brussels and the European Union? Goodbye. Image. This is an image created based on light and smoke, so you need fog to create this kind of hologram projections, not exactly a hologram, in which you have this smoke, this kind of vapor that comes out if you see it, and then you generate the three-dimensional image there, which is spectacular, right? I mean, it looks like a portal opens, as if someone were trying to grab one of the people who are there. The tourists obviously are excited with this kind of light projections. Very, very interesting too. Well, within these images, they show something that will help, well, these geology studies that are being done, right? This is an image that is made immediately based on changes in the sand, right? They're testing it there, aren't they? He says, these are responsive effects for the environment of augmented reality. This interactive tool for geoscience will be important. There, you can understand the effects of rain fluids as the virtual water moves through the landscapes according to the laws of motion. Well, they say these are augmented reality tools that will help with the study of geology and so on. It's not that kind of thing. It was, well, very, very important. Let's move on then to other matters, other interesting topics. Speaking of scientists, at the beginning there's a really interesting report about how scientists have discovered that certain habits are capable of rejuvenating the brain. But more than 8 years. So far, research has shown that the brain can be rejuvenated by 8 years just by taking these habits into account. So let's get into the details. What habits are we talking about, right? And trying to understand them a little might help us improve our own habits. Now, look at what the international study found. Today, I'll tell you who did it. Well, it's the University of Florida that made this discovery, because this is a discovery. The international study reveals that certain habits can rejuvenate the brain. For example, one habit does not. This is optimism. Optimism helps keep the brain young. Good sleep would also be one of them. The team of scientists at the University of Florida has revealed several surprising findings, he says. Adopting these habits can rejuvenate the brain by up to 8 years at least, he says. This discovery is based on a longitudinal study that followed 128 middle-aged and older adults from 4 continents over several years. 70% were women, and many lived with chronic pain, for example, with knee osteoarthritis and other conditions. But the researchers used magnetic resonance imaging and artificial intelligence to calculate each participant's brain age. Those with healthy lifestyles, optimism, good sleep, stress control, and strong social support. And they showed brains that were much younger than their chronological age, on average 8 years, but there were other brains that were even younger than that amount. Let's say the average was approximate, he says. On the other hand, factors like chronic pain, low income, social disadvantage, stress, lack of sleep, all those kinds of things. They had more aged brains. However, it was observed that the negative impact of these difficulties decreased over time, he says. If meanwhile you apply the benefits and good habits, he says, the brain could start to rejuvenate. Other habits also included not smoking, maintaining a healthy weight, and taking care of overall mental health. The study was applied for this and published in the journal Brain Communication. And it strengthens the idea that what we think, what we feel, how we live, obviously, it impacts brain health, even in difficult contexts. For example, if there were people who lived through complicated or tough situations but faced several challenges. Hostilities and skies. The heights. Does it also influence longevity? And if so, by analyzing data from 500,000 people, they concluded that responsibility reduces the risk of death by 10%, while neuroticism increases it by 3%. Extroversion was especially protective in the United States and Australia. Both studies agree on one message. As long as you make good lifestyle choices, this will shape your brain, it will shape your physical and emotional health. Well, I think that's quite interesting and easily applicable, at least some of its points. And also, since we're on that topic, I have another study for you that I found very interesting. This one is led by the biologist Shinichi Nakagawa and was published in the journal Nature. This scientific journal shows that science has discovered how to live up to 20% longer. The new study reveals that eliminating certain hormones can extend human life, although they also state that in this research they were not able to demonstrate how. But they also say you won't like it, they say, because it's by eliminating the sex hormones that life is extended. And what if? The scientific study, led by the biologist, showed that, well, it's a controversial finding. And it was just, simply to show what happens with humans. They realized that they lived longer, increasing life expectancy by about 10 to 20%. When you give up that function, this obviously applies to older people. Analysis of data from 117 vertebrate species from lions to orcas proved this. Researchers at the University of Alberta detected a clear pattern. Any animal that is sterilized lives significantly longer than those with an intact reproductive function. This happens because the body has to distribute its resources and focuses on staying young and repairing tissues. It either invests them in reproduction, or it repairs and heals you, or or suddenly, well, it invests in being reproductive. Let's say, speak in that way, right? This is just to show what the general effect is on animals. It says not just mammals. Although this type of, let's say, vasectomy doesn't change hormone production, castration does, reducing aggressive behaviors, physical risks, and cellular wear. Well, that's quite an interesting study, isn't it? But it has also attracted attention and become very controversial. No, obviously not. All this research and another study that I found very interesting is this one, which is a development to generate energy from waves. No, this topic, this hydraulic system, well, it's a topic about harnesses, basically harnesses that are generating energy. The movement of the waves is converted into electricity using mechanical or hydraulic systems, taking advantage of the moving water. It's not about sunlight, I mean not the light, but rather the movement in this case that generates the energy. So whether it's day or night, this system is generating energy 24 hours a day, right? As long as there are waves, the energy will keep being generated. That's also honestly very, very interesting. Another topic that also draws attention, now changing subjects. Is this the image? Can we put it up here? This is a topic that at least catches my attention. Let's see if I can put it there. There it is. No, he doesn't get tired. Let's see if that's not the Polish Prime Minister. There he is, right? A Law and Justice Deputy, Marek Suski, left the Culture Committee meeting very angry, unable to contain himself. He leaves the committee, saying he can't work with idiots. That's what he said. And he stood up and left. It's a parliamentary group from the Civic Coalition that has submitted a motion requesting disciplinary action against this deputy for having insulted the other members of the CEGEM Culture Committee. Well, so there's a scandal here, among politicians. The one on the right says everything and then leaves. Haha. All right, let's move on to other matters. What's happening over there in Venezuela? Let's go with that. What's happening in Venezuela? Let's talk about the details. Several topics that are interesting in this case. First of all, according to the New York Times, they show this image in which it's reported that the Venezuelan Navy is escorting several oil tankers between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. It was already known that there was a blockade by Trump, right? A blockade with Trump's Navy. Regarding the whole oil issue, Venezuela claims that oil shipments continue with full security after Caracas ordered them to be escorted with these naval ships. These ships, he says, resembled military ones meant for oil tankers leaving Jose Port due to the threat. The blockade and United States officials confirm that Washington is aware of the situation and is now considering various response options. So we might possibly see some kind of response in that regard. In the meantime, well, let's see what he has to say. Do you remember this machete? Look at what happens now with this Diosdado who pulled out his machete. Let's look at this. Do you know what it is?
What's happening? But it's not just any machete, right? There are horses. No, this thing is made with forged steel. This is... No. This is not a prop, you hear me? This is the guerrilla fighter's machete. It goes here, see? It goes here, huh? My Tupamaro brothers gave it to me.
My brothers from Tupamaro, he says, gave it to us. And well, he was there showing off his machete. And obviously, I don't know if maybe he didn't remember, but there's a story, there's a whole issue. Because the moment that President Noriega of Panama pulled out his machete, and I think it was practically the next day, when the invasion happened, right? I mean, when the United States attacked there in Panama, right? That's why I told you, yes. When I saw this, I thought someone must have commented on Twitter, and sure enough, the first comment was right below. Will history repeat itself? ask him, well, yes, everyone says what we remember about this moment, right? There it is with the way he raises his hand and everything. Diosdado Cabello is just like Noriega in that sense. And well, that's part of what's been happening in those matters, in those topics. There have been many reactions to events in Venezuela. Let's discuss the details. A big greeting to Celestial, to Francisco Arce, to the whole community that's joining us. Thank you so much. Very good. He says, Diego. He says, but it's AI images. Which one? Which image is AI? This actually, well, this one to say, not this one. Greetings, my friend. All right. The thing here with everything that's been happening with Venezuela and all these issues is that it really hasn't had much significance, because up until now, there hasn't been any real visible movement, at least not from the United States. This could take a dramatic turn, but they've been tightening all the screws. They've been, well, I imagine, reaching out to different governments. And well, that's just for starters. Little reaction from Russia, little reaction from China, right? Yesterday, China said they didn't like the United States military harassment there, but it didn't go beyond that, right? Russia warns the Trump administration about making a fatal mistake in Venezuela. And that's the part, maybe up until now, that's the most controversial, so to speak, in all these moments. In Russia, up until this moment, well, it's the country that somewhat reacts because everything had been up until now. Well, more like diplomatic comments. And this time, well, Moscow makes a call. After the oil blockade, the United States warned Venezuela, calling the actions a threat to international maritime transport. The Russian government raised its voice today, December 18th. It warns that President Donald Trump's recent decisions regarding Venezuela could become a fatal mistake. Through an official statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia expressed its deep concern over what it described as a deliberate escalation of tensions and a threat to international maritime transport. It's not part, let's say no, of the warning. It comes after the total blockade ordered by Trump on all sanctioned oil tankers linked to Venezuela. This measure aims to put even more pressure on Maduro and was reinforced by the seizure of a ship off the Venezuelan coast last week. I think that has been the most intense point. Maybe not the seizure of this ship itself, which has generated some reactions. Now, so what? That Milenario is an option by land? But they haven't said when or how, and now they're vague, saying it doesn't even have to be Venezuela, so you wonder, then where? I mean, has this whole situation been too changeable? And because of that, it's not clear what the operation is going to be, where it's headed, or what will happen if the operation actually takes place. Right now. I also think that's something that should be, well, important, right? The situation brings up many questions. I mean, first, in the event that they try to operate in Venezuela, are they going to try to change the regime or just something else? Are they going to operate against certain labs or places where tons of drugs are stored or whatever? Or are they going to operate now with a plan like, you know what? Well, there has to be a change of government because you took away X, Y, and non-oil companies from us when Chavez did all those expropriations. And then a step C, right? That there is an operation in which basically a change is made, a new regime comes in, and everything is renegotiated. It's honestly not clear. There isn't one. They claim to have a plan, but they've made similar claims before. I mean, look, since the first term, just to jog your memory, I sometimes like to go back and review the news, you know? And since the first term, since the first year he took office, Donald Trump promised that he had a plan to balance or eliminate Obamacare since the first term. Yes. In the second year, he repeated it. In the third year, he repeated it again. And that's how Biden's term went by. He kept saying he had a plan to revolutionize healthcare. A year has passed and he still hasn't presented the plan. No one knows it yet. So much so that yesterday, the Republicans, at least several Republicans, sided with the Democrats and are going to vote to extend the Obamacare program. There is still no plan. We haven't seen one. And another 4 years, including this almost finished year, have passed without it. So, when Donald Trump says, I have a plan, or there is a plan, and he doesn't present it, it's very likely that he doesn't have one. And that's probably the most worrying part, because there still isn't a clear operation. There isn't a clear plan. Unless it's just, well, harassing a bit, taking some oil here and there and all that. But really, what does that mean for the Venezuelan regime? I mean, you're going to make the regime stronger because it's going to isolate, but is it going to close itself off? Or what's going to happen? That's the main question, but it's still unanswered. I mean, I'm going to see their opinions, see what's up, and that's what we're going to do. We're not going to that topic. We'll be back in 3 minutes. How have you been? How's it going? Okay, the volume is set. You can hear it clearly. Let me know if you can, okay? How's it been going for you? How have you been? Greetings to the whole community. Greetings to Brazil, to Morena Andrade, 3762. A big greeting. How are things over there, huh? He says. If that's true about Medicare, how is the celestial state? Greetings, very good. Who else is here? He says. This is a circus. Who knows what they're doing, he says. Angie, hello. How have you been? Very good, he says. Will Italy and France give in regarding Mercosur? You say yes, I think so. Let's see what happens, right? Pedro, how have you been, Diego? He says. Venezuela is not Panama. We're in the 21st century. Nobody disagreed or said anything else. No one claimed Venezuela was Panama or that we weren't in the 21st century. But comparisons, as they say, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it does rhyme very well. Right? I mean, it doesn't sound like something from the past, from history, because there are elements that are similar, not because everything is the same, a clone. No, obviously not. I mean, there are elements that repeat themselves. Is it Latin America? Yes, yes, it's Latin America. It's a dictatorship. Yes, yes, it's a dictatorship. He has a machete. Yes, he has a machete. I mean, those are points, not points that are the same, right? And we could talk about a lot more points, pretty similar, right? The issue of trafficking, drugs, etc. I mean, there are a lot of very similar topics, right? He says, it feels like a movie to me. But that doesn't mean the reaction from the United States is going to be the same. No, nor does it mean that it has to be exactly the same. Well, not really, right? Of course, Francisco Arce sends you a big greeting. How have you been? Very good, he says. It looks like the movie where the humans, says Maya Mayu of the Shadow. Mayur of the Shadow, she says. It looks a lot like the movie where humans no longer had children, but they stayed young. If it happened to them, she says it would happen to have. I mean, not necessarily that everyone would do it, right? But of course, the decrease will happen if this occurs. No one is actually saying it will happen. In fact, I think India has demonstrated this perfectly. Africa and many countries have growing populations. I mean, let's see. But yes, well, suddenly these kinds of things at least help you understand how the human body works. I mean, suddenly it prioritizes things, right? Suddenly it gives priority to certain topics. That's why suddenly when people say you're really stressed and that affects your illness, well, of course. I mean, how is the body going to heal if it's totally stressed? Because of other things, right? I mean, when they say this, right? Victoria, long live freedom, damn it, free Venezuela. How are you, Juan Gabriel? Greetings, how have you been? Slava says. Ukraine, Celestial adds, how have you been? Greetings, who else is here? Carrie says, she says, hello, baby. You communicate through Instagram. So if we have direct messages on Instagram, look, I do have Instagram. I just don't check it often. If you send me a message, I'll read it sooner or later, but it might take me a while. So if it's something like check it now, send it to me on Twitter or to my email. I check that every day. Thanks. Not often, but I do see it on Instagram. I will see it, but it might take me 3 or 4 days, maybe even longer. Sometimes it's just that I hardly ever check it. I should, right? I should check it a bit more. How have you been? Greetings, Kareem. Greetings, Neo. Very good. How have you been? Very good. How have you been? Henry Mendez. Greetings to Portugal as well. How are things going over there, Henry? What do you think about Venezuela? Since you're from Venezuela, how do you see things? Do you think there will be any movement, or do you think there won't be? Or is there some hope, but not certainty? What's going on, he says. Maria Elena says good morning from Tehuacan, Puebla, sending hugs to those celebrating or unwell. How have you been? Greetings to you and your family. Jose Sarate, good morning. How are you, Adilson? How are you? How have you been? Very good, Adilcha. Greetings to Panama. How are you? Odilia Guzman, how have you been? Good afternoon. That's great. How are you, Eric? Hello, Eric Marino. What's new? How are you, Sadi? Hello to everyone in the community joining in. Greetings, Leonardo. Very good. Thank you for joining us. Christy Cram, greetings to you as well. Christy, Monica Polanco, right? Monica Polanco, how are you? Thanks for joining us. Merlin, very good. Is there anyone to greet us? Greetings also to Margot. I know that many don't comment, but at least a hello, right? At least a hello. How are you all, right? If you'd like, let us know where you're watching from. That would be great. Margot sends greetings from the Dominican Republic. How are you? Greetings to you and your family as well. Etila says, who is going to attack NATO? Etila says, or rather I asked, who is attacking NATO, right? Because it's actually an attack that's been ongoing since 2022, according to reports. In a hybrid war, right? With cyber attacks, with sabotage, with this kind of thing, with disinformation, etc., right? Greetings, Pantarita. Thank you very much for that like. Margolandia McDonald. Good morning. Call for a party in the comments and leave it up, he says. He says, I don't know what the email is. He says it's the same as always, the one that's always been posted. It shows up there on the channel, and if not, is it Jose dot Pepe in Vivo.com, right? That's how it is. That's the email. Also on Twitter, the email is there. It used to show up on screen. It's not there now, right? There's also a chat contact area on the website. That chat goes straight to my email, so you can also reach me that way, right? On the website, pepeinvivo.com. You go there and you'll find the email and also the chat, and both of them come directly to me. Yes, this is Jose at pepenvivo.com. That's the email. Okay, so write it down for anything, an emergency, an important note or something. I'm always on top of it. Okay. Monica, greetings from afar. Which part of Spain are you in? It says Jose Gonzalez all the way to California. A big greeting. How are you, Jose? Very good, Marlon. How are you? How have you been? Thank you very much, he says. I listen to it on delay more. I watch you every day. Awesome. Thank you very much, Marlon. That's so cool. Greetings all the way to Brazil. And it's great to know that you watch us every day. Awesome. Most people watch us on delay, not due to notifications or schedules, but simply at different times. Benedicto, how are you? I'm good. How about you? To the whole community, he says, okay. He says, great. Well, he says Italy. He says he doesn't know, and Mario Crespo also says he doesn't know, but others say yes. Good morning, Mars Alexander 3. 34 in the morning in Thailand, not in Taiwan. Greetings to Taiwan, Mars. Yesterday, once again, the entire message given by the president of Taiwan. And look, I had it here, and I didn't put it anymore, but I think I have it mixed up, because I always put everything in order as it appeared. It's really good. The message is very interesting, because I didn't feel like it was about wanting war, but more like I'm ready, you know? I mean, it's like we're all ready here to defend ourselves, right? I mean, like, if they see that things are kind of complicated, like he says, now that comparison really fits, doesn't it? Yeah, but yeah, it's intense. It's not complicated to see what's happening in this area. There are basically two exits for China. Very narrow. Here a straight is Japan, that's Taiwan, and this is Japan. All of this is Japan up to here, and there's just a little bit of international water right at this point. Look, if you notice, here are the Japanese, and over here there are others, but here there's a little piece that's considered a strait, meaning international waters, where China can go out through here, and over here there's another strait. So between Taiwan and the Philippines there's another strait. So it's really curious, because China has a huge coastline, but to get out, it can only go through that strait and that other strait. Well, and also through here. Not even going around, because it's a whole hassle since you have to go through a bunch of countries. But let's say those are the two ways. So, having absolute control over Taiwan would mean having total control over this area and letting China go out through this whole region however it wants. So, is that one of the things that bothers China the most right now? But also, they know about the reaction. They know what could happen. In any case, if they try to make a move there, right? So that's the point. Insisting on that. Greetings. How are you doing, awesome Celestial? Greetings from Morena says. How are you doing? What's up, Benedicto? How's this state? Sibas says. Also, all the way to Spain, a big greeting, Catalunya says. Monica, Catalunya, awesome. That's great. Awesome, awesome. This one says towards the north, which is the northeast of Spain. Awesome. Brazil, which part, Morena? By the way, which part of Brazil? It says, that's right. China, it says it has complicated exits. That's right, that's right. Celestial, awesome. You can't... Well, that's it. I'll say goodbye for now. We'll be back later with more information about what's happening in the world. Let's do some summaries. A little later, they'll start appearing on the channel, and at night, we'll be here at 8:30 at night. If possible, come earlier, as several interesting pieces of information are coming today. I'm waiting for several reports, which are expected to start coming in this afternoon. We'll confirm soon and discuss tonight or earlier if urgent. Guadalupe, how have you been? Greetings from Michoacan, known as the most peaceful state in Mexico. Greetings, Guadalupe. That's how it's going to be. You'll see. That's how it's going to be. Greetings, Guadalupe. Hope you're doing well. Jose Morena. Benedicto Mars on Asia. We have a place to talk and many musicians needing more practice. Greetings. Hope you're well. Go out. We keep talking here and also over there. We're on Telegram, on Twitter, on Instagram. If we need to get more involved, just check the info there. Great. Well, a hug. See you later. Goodbye. And now, goodbye. Farewell.
Thank you for watching the Pepe News Live, where the events of planet Earth and secrets of outer space are analyzed like nowhere else. Thank you for subscribing.